What's good? It's your boy Fanon. More than happy today to be talking about the welterweights, my favorite weight class in boxing, especially since the heavyweight division is going through all kind of nonsense right about now. Real quick, shout out to 78 Sports TV, shout out to Trap House Boxing. I just watched a video that 78 did about a subject I was thinking about covering today, man, but he did a really great video on it. So if you haven't checked it out, go check out that video on his channel. And he talks about the fact that Danny Garcia is now the number one contender, or ranked number one by the WBC and ranked number one by the WBA. And for some reason, WBC decided to put him at number one over Shawn Showtime Porter. So before I do that, look, I'm definitely going to be doing a live stream today. Today's my birthday. So my wife asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday. I was like, I just want to make videos. So they will be leaving me alone for me to be able to talk boxing. So I'm very excited about that. But to know about the live streams, please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. And that way you can be notified. I don't do them on a regular set schedule. I do them pretty much every day, and I'm definitely trying to do more of that on the channel. So please, hit the bell icon so that you know how to be notified for those videos. So, as of this week, Danny Swift Garcia is the number one number one rated contender by the World Boxing Council, the WBC. And I'm not sure, first of all, it would make it sound off the cuff like that makes some change. And I don't see the change because I don't see why that would make, according to the WBC rules, the way that I read them, the number one contender doesn't mean that you're going to be the mandatory. So I have not heard that Shawn Porter is now becoming the second mandatory because for some ridiculous reason, the WBC has ordered back-to-back mandatory title defenses for Keith Thurman. Now, as many people know, Keith Thurman has been out for a while with his elbow injury. Before that, he's been pretty inactive as of late. And there's been a big push in the boxing community and a lot of interest to get him in the ring with Errol Spence Jr. But Shawn Porter has to take a tune-up. We don't know who that tune-up fight is against. It was supposed to be it was rumored to be against Jesse Vargas. I suppose my understanding is that the negotiations were taking place, but then Keith Thurman removed Jesse Vargas from consideration for that fight. And so we don't know who he's going to fight. I believe that it's going to be in May, but don't know who against. But after that, Keith Thurman is supposed to defend a mandatory. And that first mandatory should be Shawn Porter. And it was ordered to be Shawn Porter. And then after that, Danny Garcia got another mandatory shot. I agree with 78 Sports TV. I don't understand the logic in that. Because number one, what happens if Shawn Porter beats Keith Thurman? Are you going to immediately then order a mandatory defense against Danny Garcia? So he wins the championship and I don't believe there would be a rematch clause because I don't think that you have those in mandatories and mandatory title defenses. So what is the Shawn Porter automatically become the mandatory or the winner of Shawn Porter versus Danny Garcia automatically become the no, I'm sorry. I said that wrong twice. Does the winner, if Shawn Porter beats Keith Thurman, does that mean that Shawn Porter immediately has to fight Danny Garcia? I mean, it just seems to be a whole lot of nonsense for no good reason. What good does it do to you to order a second mandatory before the first mandatory fights? Unless you're just saying that you definitely want to lock Keith Thurman into back-to-back fights against guys that you believe they can sell, who's going to be able to, give you a nice sanctioning fee or what have you. I mean, just the thing that I don't understand is the necessity to have back-to-back mandatories for Keith Thurman. especially since we know dang well dude's time is coming to an end as champion anyway. At least in my opinion, because Errol Spence Jr. is there. And Errol Spence Jr. is calling for this dude. And a whole bunch of fight fans want to see that. But now we're stuck, even with the change between 1 and 2. For me, as a boxing fan, it doesn't change much. Because all that means is that Keith Thurman's got to fight somebody. At the worst, it means he just fights one guy I don't want to see him fight that he already fought before the other guy that I don't want to see him fight that he already fought. So for me, the change for the WBC, for the number 1 ranking to the number 2 ranking for Shawn Porter, however you have that, that's a distinction without a difference for me. Now for Shawn Porter, it is without a doubt a spit in the face. Because even if he keeps his mandatory, why would you change them to number 1 off of a win against Brandon Rios? It's not like Brandon Rios was Brandon Rios ever like ranked in this? Was he ranked? I mean, I look at the welterweight divisions right now. I mean, you don't have in the WBC, you have Adrian Granados is the number 10, and that's who Shawn Porter just beat. Oh, they got Brandon Rios at the number 9. Why in the world would you put Brandon Rios over Adrian Granados? That must be the kind of quirky reasoning that they're using, because they say, okay, Shawn Porter's last fight was against a guy that they had ranked number 10 and against a guy that the number 2 guy had fought the number 9 guy. So when they recalculated their rankings, Shawn Porter, Danny Garcia now jumps over Shawn Porter. Even though the funny thing is, I do believe that Shawn Porter, why don't you just have these two dudes fight? Why don't you just do what you just did down at 140 pounds with the Mirimam, Regis Porgray, Jose Ramirez, and Victor Postal? The WBC had 4 dudes. The number 1 was Amiri Imam. The number 2 was Regis Porgray. The number 3 was Carlos Ramirez. Number 4 was Postal. They ordered, and the championship was when the championship was vacant, right after Terrence Crawford moved up. So the same organization ordered the number 1 and the number 3 to fight, and then the number 2 and the number 4 to fight. In the situation that you had before with the WBC, prior to this change, you had the number 1. Yeah, the number 1 was Shawn Porter. The number 2 was Danny Garcia. You couldn't order number 3, Manny Pacquiao, because he's trying to fight Lucas Matisse, the regular champion for the WBA. So that would be that's out of order for him. And how the hell is Manny Pacquiao that high? Then you have Jesse Vargas, and you have Cesar Manuel. Cesar Manuel, I can't pronounce his name. Barrianova. I mean, or you got Ray Robinson. I mean, I don't understand. I don't see it, man. Unless they're considering that they had a little mini tournament. And even if they want to do it, call that a mini tournament. You had the number 1 and the number 2 fight the number 9 and the number 10. Now force the number 1 and 2 to fight. Now force the number 1 and 2 to fight. So all you have to do. So I'm okay and I do believe that might actually make Shawn Porter happy. Because Shawn Porter, as you see in this picture, dang sure jumped up in the ring with Danny Garcia and was like, "Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen." I wonder. Of course, I don't know Kenny Porter. At 78 Sports TV knows Kenny Porter, but now I see why Shawn Porter was just all out of his skin with Danny Garcia, Brandon Rios. Man, I wonder if this dude had any knowledge or anticipation of the fact that he might be getting a shaft handed to him. Now, I think it's a shaft from what I can see. I've yet to hear that they've now that they've changed the order of the mandatory defense for Shawn Porter, for Keith Thurman. If and when they do that, then it's a full-fledged, screw job. That would be a full-fledged screw job. But hey, it is what it is, man. And I'm hoping that I just want these two to fight. Just make the fight. Just have Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman fight. And whoever those guys are, let them be the guy to get Keith Thurman. And if Keith Thurman keeps playing around, strip Keith Thurman. Now that's the move that I would really like to see. Strip Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman has fought what, one time in the last. Let me look at Keith Thurman's record here, man. How often? When's the last time Keith Thurman actually? How often? This has got to be one of the most. This is an inactive champion, and I don't like to see strips. I don't like to see guys get stripped for just no good reason. But one time is literally one time. He's literally fighting one time a year. See, he has not fought in a year. He's not fought in over a year. The last fight he had was against Danny Garcia, March of last year. And the fight before that was June of 2016. And before that was almost a year before that with Luis Collazo. And then, 15, he fought 2 times against Luis Collazo and Robert Guerrero. But, hey, man, that might be what I wouldn't mind seeing at all. Tell Keith Thurman, look, you got to name this opponent, and then after you get done with this dude, you got 3 months. You got 3 months. Rest your elbow, ice your elbow, and get back out, or you got to get stripped. That if the WBC did that, then I wouldn't necessarily. Then I'd be like, all right, we know that there's corruption, even though my definition of corruption might be a little different than other people. I think when people are crook and systems are designed to be to operate in a certain way, then it ain't crooked. They're not corrupt. It's the system is working just the way that it's supposed to work. And if you read the bylaws of the WBC, if you read that shit, they can do whatever they want, whenever they want to, as long as they have agreement between a number of commissioners. I forget what is the board of directors, whatever or the executive board. I can't remember what it's called, but as long as they have agreement between them and or the wishes of Jose Suleiman Jr., they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. So there is no rules over there. So pretty much when we see things like this, it's not because it's not supposed to act like that. That's how it's supposed to act. And it's how it's supposed to go down. They're supposed to do whatever the hell they want because they are a business. And like 78 was killing me. Sorry, man. I usually don't do direct videos referencing to other videos, but man, this dude was on point like a champ. They're going to run it like a business because that is. Everybody in there is getting paid. Jose Suleiman gets a paycheck. The commissioners, whoever it is, the executive board gets a paycheck. At the end of the day, they got to keep their lights on. They got to pay their phone bills. They got to pay for the diamonds to put in the little belts, all of that stuff. They definitely have to do that. So, yeah, I'm quite sure that they're going to do whatever they have to do in order to make as much money as they can. But to the point that 78 Sports TV said, man, dude's 100% right. Look, you are the sucker. The money's coming from you. The money's coming from me. So why in the world would I want to pay more money for a fight than I have to pay? And on top of that, if I'm going to pay it, let me see what I want to see. Okay, if I have to pay, if I've got to pay to see boxing, if I got to have a Showtime subscription, if I got to have an HBO subscription, I got to pay a cable bill. I got to pay an internet bill. I got to do whatever. I got to pay for tickets to go to the fight. I got to pay for the hotel rooms to stay when I go to the fight. If I got to do all of those things, give me the fight I want to see. And the base part of this is that they're not giving you the fights you want to see. We've already seen Keith Thurman versus Shawn Porter. It was the fight before last for Keith Thurman. The time before last that Keith Thurman was in the ring, it was against Shawn Porter. If Danny Garcia, I just saw Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia. Just saw it. That was his last fight. Why would you put this dude back in definitely is the case if Danny Garcia winds up where the WBC says, oh no, we want the Danny Garcia fight to happen first. If that is the case, and I'm not saying it's not the case. I'm just saying from what I saw from having read their rules, And the fact that as of right now, I haven't heard anything about them moving Shawn Porter out of that mandatory position. But if they did move Shawn Porter out of that mandatory position, out of the mandatory, from being the mandatory, and moved up Danny Garcia, then that would be back-to-back fights with Danny Garcia and Shawn Porter and Keith Thurman. And that I would scream corruption. I mean, or scream bull crap. You know what I mean? Just that's some crap. I would scream that because we just saw the fight the last time the dude did it. And then what happens? You know what I mean? What happens after Keith Thurman beat Danny Garcia fights Keith Thurman? Then Danny Garcia's got to get mandatories. Oh man, we will never ever see unification in that division. We will never see unification in that division. It's hard enough to believe that I'm going to be able to see any type of unification at 147 pounds with Keith Thurman there. I definitely don't think Danny Garcia being there is going to be unifying jack. We might get to see a Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia. Like I could see if Danny Garcia was the champion there, I could see him fighting Mikey Garcia. I don't see him fighting Errol Spence. And I don't see, Mikey Garcia says he wants to fight Errol Spence, but, we'll see. But anyway, it is what it is with this WBC stuff, man. Hopefully that this thing, as far as switching the rankings, doesn't wind up affecting Shawn Porter. Doesn't get him, doesn't remove him from the mandatory title defense that they've already ordered for Keith Thurman, right? Danny Garcia having any type of mandatory shot right now, I mean, that's funny business to me. Maybe what they're trying to do is trying to keep Danny Garcia happy and keep Danny Garcia from, I don't know, going over there and fighting for the WBA. But that's another thing. Danny Garcia is now the number one contender for Keith Thurman in the WBA and the WBC. So if the WBA orders a mandatory title defense if the WBA orders a mandatory title defense against Keith Thurman, against their number one, because I haven't heard of the WBA ordering one yet, but the WBA can order a mandatory title defense for Keith Thurman as well. So if the WBA orders, and their rule says it's the number one guy, and then so what would happen if the WBA orders a mandatory title defense for Keith Thurman against Danny Garcia, and Danny Garcia, and Keith Thurman goes to the WBA and says, "Look, your number one man, it's your number one guy is also my mandatory for the WBA. Can you switch those around?" And then that would give the WBA an excuse to do it. So we'll see how all this stuff plays out. We'll see how it all plays out. But, at the end of the day, man, I want to see my guy Errol Spence Jr. in with Keith Thurman. Shawn Porter, I think if he got his hands on the WBC belt, because he would get his hands on the WBC and the WBA belt, I think Shawn Porter would be more inclined to fight Errol Spence Jr. than Keith Thurman obviously is. And I think he'd be more inclined than, Danny Hollywood Garcia. Because I like Danny Garcia as a fighter, but I think Danny Garcia is dude is real Showtime right about now, man. He's real Showtime. And I would suspect that he would go the route of a Mikey Garcia fight. He might even go the route of a Terrence Crawford fight. I could see Danny Garcia fighting Terrence Crawford. I could see him being willing to do that. There's just something in his eyes, just something in the way that he talks about, something in the way that Danny Garcia talks about Errol Spence that makes me believe that he don't really want that smoke. He don't want no problems. He don't want any issues with Errol Spence Jr. And the more of this stuff that goes around, the more I'm thinking, hey man, maybe. Now I definitely don't think that Errol Spence Jr. should drop his belt and go to the WBC and get high in the WBC and the WBA rankings, because all that means is the dudes are going to refuse to fight him there. You know what I mean? They're just going to refuse to fight him there. He keeps his IBF title, and eventually, hopefully, all this stuff will pan out and we'll be able to see that fight. But You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Shawn Porter's fighting style. I think the world of the dude as a person, and his father strikes me to be just a very, you know, on his business type of dude. So I wish them the best, and I certainly hope they don't get screwed out of an opportunity that they definitely earned. Even though I want to see something different, you know, they've definitely done the work. They put themselves in a position to be there, and they deserve to get it. So hopefully, you know, they won't allow him to duck Shawn Porter. Peace.